Going to get these little Gretchins started by painting their feet. This is Vallejo Express khaki drills going on. Just using a very cheap brush from Amazon and making sure I go all the way up to the edges of whatever detail I'm painting. That's going to be key throughout this painting process. So you might notice that I've already done a bit of prep ahead of videoing here, and that is just to block out the blacks and the metallics with some black paint. And normally I'd have done some black lining at this point as well, but I've got 22 of these guys to paint and I really wanted to see just how fast I could go. So in this case we've omitted the black lining and straight into the colour. Now just working my way up the model, time for some of the main colours. So a bit of good old poppy red from the army painter here, and again just going to apply this with a cheap brush and make sure I go right the way up to the edges. Next up, a bit of Vallejo Express Mystic Blue. I'm just going to start working on the main clothing now. Time to hit some of the smaller details now. Going to use some Citadel Contrast snakebite leather to just do the leather straps and pouches. it's time for the all-important skin. Going to use some Citadel Contrast Gut Ripper Flesh here. Now, I do love this paint for very close to the old Goblin Green type finish, but it is quite tricky to use. So I'll be doing my best to get this as smooth as I can, but later on we'll come back with some glazing and some layering to smooth it right out. So once I've got the first layer down on the skin, I'm going to come in and do the eyes and teeth. Just like to get these done now in case I make a mistake. It's a little bit easier to fix than when the skin is completely finished. So I've got some Pro Acryl Bold Paroli Red. I'm not thinning it down or anything, I'm just using it straight out of the bottle, and then I'm really aiming here to make sure I cover the entirety of the eyeball in this nice red colour. And now I'm going to base coat the teeth. I'm using Vallejo Game Colour Bone White here, and again just looking for a nice coverage over the entirety of the teeth. We'll come back later and highlight them. Now I'm going to highlight the eyeballs, and for that I'm going to use a bit of Vallejo Game Colour Gold Yellow, again straight out of the bottle, and just looking to take a small drop of this onto the brush and spot it into the middle of the eye. And to highlight the teeth, we're going to use a bit of Pro Acryl Bold Titanium White. So I actually started out by glazing the skin up, which is what I normally do, gives you a wonderful smooth finish, but in the end, to go a bit quicker, I did layer, which is very similar to glazing, just with thicker paint. In this case I used a mixture of Vallejo Game Colour, Dead Flesh, Bile Green and some Glaze Medium, and of course a good amount of water in this mix as well. And then I'm just trying to apply this all over the flesh to the raised areas, trying to avoid letting it go into the recesses and really aiming just to smooth everything out with this layer. Once that layer's had a chance to dry, I'll just come back in with a second layer. It's pretty much the same again. I can try and focus on a smaller area to try and bring up the highlights, but really just aiming to get the skin smoothed out and looking nice. And then, if necessary, I will continue this process, adding layers until I'm happy with how smooth the skin is. I think in this case for most of these guys I did either 2 or 3 layers. And you can probably see here now that my mixture is a lot thicker. It's not really glazing on, more of a layer at this time. I'd say still quite a nice result, a lot faster than glazing. Once I'm happy with how smooth the skin's looking, I come back with a bit of gut ripper flesh and just fix some areas, reinstate some of the shading where I might have just gone into it by accident with the glaze. I decided then it was time to look at the weapons on these guys. I do feel the most important parts of these miniatures are the skin, particularly the face, hands and the weapons that they're holding. So I've got a bit of Citadel Contrast Magma Drop Flame here, and I'm just applying it to this little bit, I don't know what you call this, it's not the barrel of the gun, but it's part of the barrel. You see it just sits quite recessed, so I figured it might be quite tricky to get this done without splashing it up onto the other areas. So doing it first makes it nice and easy to come back in and fix it with some white paint if I need to. And it's back on with some main colours. So here, back to my favourite army painter, Poppy Red, and we're just painting this onto his headdress here and onto his gun as well. and time for some Citadel contrast. Imperial Fist, my go-to yellow, and yellow is the accent colour in my colour schemes. I'll be doing the trim on his clothes and the barrel of his gun and perhaps some other little details. Just pick out with this nice vibrant yellow. Then I wanted to take care of the little skulls all over these little models, and for that I've got good old Citadel Contrast Skeleton Horde. It's a really good paint, this one, very versatile, very useful. The last major bit to do, I think, here is the metallics. I'm going to come in and base coat all of the silver parts next using some Citadel lead belcher. It's worth noting that later on I will be using some ultra matte varnish, which almost completely kills the metallics. So just looking to get them base coated now, and then later we'll come back after that varnish stage and brighten them all up again. one of my favourite parts of the process here, and that is adding in the orange blends. I'm doing this here on the trim of the headdress on these guys, go on the spike on top of their head and on their gun. Now, it doesn't take too long to get these orange blends in, but I really think they make a big difference. So what I'm using here is a mixture of magma drop flame and a lot of Citadel contrast medium. So I will fill the well on my palette up with the medium and then just dip a brush, a very small amount of magma drop flame, and mix that together to make this glaze mixture, which I then apply onto the model. In the well next door is just clean water, and I will sometimes mix and blend on the model. If I put a bit of the glaze on, I think it's too strong, I can go straight into the water and feather it out with that. Or sometimes I will dip my brush in the water first before dipping it into the glaze, so I've got a weaker mix on the brush. And it's honestly easier than it sounds. After you have a bit of practice, you really get a feel for it, and it sort of feels creative and fun to do. So I strongly suggest giving this a go. So it can take a few layers to get the blend in, and we do need to give it a chance to dry between the layers. So this is something I find works particularly well if you've got a large batch of models to paint, as by the time you've finished putting the layer on the last one, the first one should be dry again. Failing that, we can always get the hairdryer on them. Once I've finished blending with the orange, I come back with some Imperial Fist and just go in the other direction. This doesn't make a huge difference, but it does help to tie the blend together and make it a little bit warmer, I find. So these have been through the varnish stages now. I do a layer of gloss followed by a layer of ultra matte, and I'm now just going to work on the metallics and brighten them back up. This is a mixture of lead belcher and runefang steel. In hindsight, I should have made it a touch darker, but I'm just applying this onto the blades of the weapon because they're quite a large metallic area. For everything else, we'll just be going with straight runefang steel. And here's the runefang steel, so we're just going to aim to brighten up all of the silver areas with this and highlight the swords. And that is our little Gretchin done. Now all there is left to do is pop him on his base, like so. Hold on a minute. What do you mean that's not the same one? And that's these little guys done. Thank you so much for watching all the way through to the end of the video. This is one of my first videos here on YouTube, so do appreciate any advice or support you guys can give me. I'd also really love it if you could subscribe, because I'm trying to hit 50 subscribers so I can start doing live painting sessions here on YouTube. That's it for now. Yeah, we'll see you in the next one.